Hello, welcome everybody to the IVF Company and Kent University weekly webinar. I want to introduce the only Professor Darren Griffin. He is the director of the IVF Master Degree in Reproductive Medicine at the University of Kent in the United Kingdom. He is also the director of the PhD program in reproductive genetics. So if you want to join the PhD also, you are welcome. And I just want to say thank you for Zahra Yousefi from all the way from Denmark. She is the area sales manager of Europe and Middle East of IVF Tech that is powering this program, this webinar, and the partner of the IVF company in our training center in Dubai. So I will leave you with the professor, and I hope you guys enjoy this webisode. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome. It is delightful to be back. It is 8 o'clock in Dubai. It is 5 o'clock over here in the UK, and we are delighted to welcome you for another couple of very, very exciting talks for our program IVF Around the World. Thanks again to Zara and IVF Tech for the supporting this particular meeting. We have two very exciting speakers for you today. The first of all, we're going to hear from Rawan Haroun. Rawan recently joined us on our IVF and PGT course, and I know that she is going to tell us a little bit about female infertility. So without further ado, Rawan, I will hand over to you. If you want to share your slides, go ahead. And just while she's doing that, just to remind you all that please do post some questions. We'll have at least 10 minutes for questions at the end of Rawan's talk. Rawan, over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rawan Haroun. I'm a medical lab technician and I graduated from both the IVF and the PGT courses offered by the University of Kent. In today's presentation, I will discuss structural variations in the endometrial microbiota, and it will give us hints on female infertility. Learning outcomes. Upon completing this presentation, you will have knowledge about the microbiota of the female reproductive tract, recurrent implantation failure, classification of the endometrium, analysis of endometrial microbiota, purpose, method, results, and conclusion of the study and different studies. Starting off, let's define the term microbiota. It refers to microorganisms colonizing human tissues that are exposed to the external environment. Now, as we all know, bacterial cells make up 3% of the total human body. Thus, it is very crucial for us to maintain healthy and balanced bacterial communities in the human body to prevent a wide variety of diseases. Please note that this is fairly a new topic in the IVF world and in reproductive medicine. Now, what do we normally expect to see in healthy premenopausal women? Usually, we would expect to see the species Lactobacilli dominating the vaginal cavity. This bacteria is very crucial because it prevents vaginosis and other diseases by lowering the pH through lactic acid production. What we can do now is we can take this information to help us characterize the endometrial microbiota in infertile women, to help us define a specific endometrium associated with implantation failure. Previously, an initial dogma stated that a healthy uterine has to be sterile and that the presence of microbes is pathological. This was proven wrong. It is completely normal to have microbial communities present among the vagina, cervical canal, uterus, and fallopian tube. In the upcoming slides, I will discuss the importance of the maternal microbiota in pregnancy and examine whether changes in maternal composition of the microbiota is linked to infertility. Recurrent implantation failure. This topic suggests the importance of the endometrium in its environment. It usually happens after we have 3 failed IVF cycles with the transfer of morphologically good embryos. Now, some people might comment about the euploid status of these embryos. Well, although aneuploidy of the embryos might contribute to recurrent implantation failure, euploid embryos can still fail by a 40% rate. Most studies classified the endometrium using the 16S rRNA gene sequencing. They divided them into two categories. The first one is the lactobacillus-dominated microbiota, where more than 90% of their present species are the lactobacilli. The second category is the non-lactobacillus-dominated microbiota, where less than 90% are the lactobacillus species and more than 10% are other bacteria. Now I'm going to discuss a very specific study. It's actually a Japanese paper that aimed to analyze the endometrial and vaginal microbiota among an infertile population by sequencing. I chose this paper in particular because of two main reasons. The first one is because it gives us more than one lead, and the second one is because this research in particular studies the menstrual cycles of the participants not only at the time of the research, but also afterwards. What happens is that 102 samples from infertile women were collected, 79 of which were IVF patients and 23 were not, and also 7 healthy volunteers participated. The samples collected were endometrial fluid and vaginal discharge. The reason behind collecting vaginal discharge is because the microbiota in the vagina are very closely correlated to the microbiota in the endometrium. So to study one, you have to study the other. Samples were collected by an intrauterine insemination catheter, and the bacterial status was analyzed. Here are the results regarding the lactobacillus-dominated microbiota in the endometrium versus the vagina. In IVF patients, we have 38% versus 44.3%. In non-IVF patients, we have 73.9% versus 73.9%. And in healthy volunteers, we have 85.7% versus 85.7%. It was observed that the percent of endometrial lactobacilli in healthy women was very stable within the same menstrual cycle and also in the following one. It was also observed that 15 patients achieved pregnancy by single embryo transfer during this study. And the most significant finding was that the median percentage of the lactobacillus in pregnant women was 96.45%. So we can conclude that a considerable percent of the non-lactobacillus dominated microbiota was observed in the endometrium of Japanese infertile women. Maybe this explains the reason behind this population being particularly known for its infertility. Another conclusion is that increased lactobacilli levels in the endometrium might favor implantation rates. To be fair, let's discuss some downsides of this study. In my opinion, the sample taken was very small, specifically the number of healthy volunteers, which were only 7 females. Also, all the data collected was from the same population, thus we could not generalize it to other populations. I tried my best not to stick to just one paper and be biased, so here are different hypotheses I found in different papers. The first one agrees with the study I just showed you, and it categorizes the endometrium into either lactobacillus dominated or non-lactobacillus dominated. Another paper that analyzed endometrial samples reported no lactobacilli colonization. A third paper showed no direct correlation between the concentration of the lactobacillus and pregnancy rates in IVF patients. Now, why would you have a lot of different hypotheses regarding the same topic? Well, here are some reasons, and I'm sure there's 100 more. It could be due to contamination from adjacent vaginal tissue, because of different populations in each study, different environmental factors, and various ways of collecting the sample. A very important thing too is at what stage of the menstrual cycle were the samples collected. What's next? Now, as mentioned earlier, analysis of the endometrial microbiota is a new approach, and not enough studies have been done to draw a strict conclusion. The study I discussed earlier only gives us a lead, and nothing has been established yet. Now, while preparing this presentation, I was wondering if maybe the endometrial microbiota could be one of the reasons for idiopathic infertility. I would like to know what you guys think. I'm going to run a poll just right now. And if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have a poll. Does endometrial microbiota contribute to idiopathic infertility? And it's a simple yes, no. So we would like you to vote if you would. We've got 18% of you voted. We're now up to 30%. That's gone very quickly. We'll see if we can get it at least to 50%. Oh, we're at 40 already. So I am going to close the poll in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close the poll, please, if you would. Thank you very much. And I'm very, very pleased to say that we have 86% yes and 14% no. So, Rawan, what do you think about that?
I think it's just a guess. We don't have definite answers yes, but I think it could be one of the reasons because I don't believe in something called idiopathic infertility. There's nothing called bad luck. There must be a reason that we still don't know.
Excellent. That's a very, very good point. So is your presentation done, or have you got a little bit more to go?
No, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Well, listen, Rawan, that was an absolutely fantastic talk. I love the fact that very, very to the point and got all the key points in there. So it's fantastic. So let's see if we got some questions, shall we? Well, one person has said greetings from Paraguay. So Cesar, greetings from Paraguay to you as well. And at the moment, we don't seem to have any more questions right now. So what I'm suggesting that we're going to do is I'll take the second speaker, who has now joined us, and then we'll take questions on both talks at the end, if that's okay. But we've got a very nice comment here from Rania, who just said your talk was amazing. So that's absolutely lovely for them to say, and I would back that up entirely. So, ladies and gentlemen, Rawan will be on the line, and you are more than welcome to ask questions of her and of our next speaker, who is Dr. Abayomi Ajayi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He is Chief Executive Officer of the Nordica Fertility Center with offices in Sharjah, founder of the Physicians Roundtable, the Endometrial Support Group, and co-founder of the African Endometrial Awareness Support Foundation. He's a convener of the of a mentoring program aimed at providing mentorship and guidance for young medical professionals, and he's a member of numerous societies, which I won't list here. He is alumnus of Stanford University Seed Institute of Innovation in Developing Economics. So, Abayomi, it's an absolute delight to welcome you. If you'd like to start sharing your slides, that'd be wonderful. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Griffin, for the generous introduction. Can you see my slides?
We can indeed, yes.
Wonderful, great. It's such an honor to be here today and to be talking about IVF in Africa. What I'm going to do is just give a synopsis, and then probably this should lead to a discussion on this topic because it's so wide. And you know, until recently, whenever I go outside of Africa and I say I'm a fertility doctor, I used to have people just give me this kind of snare. And some very brave ones will come to me and say, are you sure that that's a viable business where you come from? And it shows how people perceive infertility and the treatment of infertility in Africa. So I'm going to go through this outline, and then we'll see how it shouldn't take us more than a few minutes, and we should be done. Okay, we know that infertility is a universal problem with the highest prevalence in low-resource countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where infection-related tuber damage is mainly the cause. And we estimate about 180 million couples in developing countries suffer from infertility. We know that Africa considers about 16% of the world population, but its share of ART is much less. It's estimated to be about 1%. We started embracing ART in Africa very early in the 80s, and this has continued to expand. We remember that the first baby was born in 1978. This practice has continued to expand, though very slowly, and with the exception of Egypt and South Africa, until 2001, there was very little interest in subfertility prevention and treatment in Africa. The first baby in West Africa was actually born at the Lagos Teaching Hospital in Lagos University Teaching Hospital in 1989. But by 2001, there were 8 assisted conception units carrying out IVF in sub-Saharan Africa. There are several barriers to the wide application of ART in Africa. We're going to try to go over some of them. But we know that infertility is still a big problem, especially in African countries where there's a social stigma of childlessness, and can lead to isolation and abandonment. And we know that compared to our Western societies, the consequences of involuntary childlessness are more pronounced and create broader problems in Africa, particularly for our women, who are frequently stigmatized, isolated, ostracized, disinherited, and neglected by family and even the local community. And so one would think that ART should be embraced fully in this part of the world. But there's so many hurdles to implementing ART in most African countries. And like I said, we're going to look at some of them because access to ART remains very low in most countries in Africa. In fact, one of the people who have done a lot of work on this, the Ombele from Belgium, who is the coordinator of the Special Task Force on Developing Countries and Infertility, and also the founder of Working Egg Foundation, said it's less than about 1.5% of the population of Africa has access to ART. So what is the situation currently? I'll say it's difficult to find out how many IVF centers are in Africa. Data is always a problem in this part of the world. The African countries with the highest number of IVF centers are Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya. In the World Report on Assisted Reproductive Technology by Adams in 2017, Africa represented only 1% of global ART activity. Like I said earlier on, the population does not reflect the same. Only 21 out of 54 African countries have at least one self-registered IVF unit, and a total of 151 IVF units were self-registered in Africa in 2019. But the number is growing by the day. I must warn that this number does not actually represent the figure, the total number of centers in Africa, because many centers just did not register. This is shown in this map. Okay, we can see the four big guys in Africa when it comes to assisted reproduction. But I can tell for free that right now, from the figures from the Association for Fertility and Reproductive Health, the Nigerian sort of HFEA, over 100 IVF clinics are registered in Nigeria right now, as opposed to the 12 that we can see in that map. So what are the major issues? What are the challenges that we have to face in order to make access widespread in Africa? From the work of FOSA in 2002, we have agreed that to meet the needs of ART, we need to be providing about 1,500 cycles per million population. The truth in Africa is that ART is mainly in the private sector. Well, health is a little bit lopsided in Africa, I must say, because we've seen that about 60% of patients in Africa actually are attended to in the private sector. But when it comes to ART, it's probably about 95% of the services are provided in the private sector. We know that if we compare the dollar to dollar, the cost of IVF in Africa is much cheaper than in the United States, for example, where it goes for over $9,000 averagely. But in Africa, we know that in Nigeria, it ranges between $2,800 and $3,000 in both the private and public sector. But the problem is that the national monthly minimum wage is approximately is approximately just $50. So let's look at some of these barriers. We know that there are epidemiological barriers in the sense that we don't even have this. We don't know what the burden of infertility really is in Africa in order for us to be able to plan. So data is one of the big problems that we really need to get right in order for us to be able to know how to cater for our people who have infertility. Of course, geographical barriers, there's the disparity between the rich and the poor countries and between rural and urban regions in the same country. Because ART services, like I said, are confined to the private sector. They're usually in the urban areas. Of course, financial barriers are also very prominent in Africa because most spend on ART is out-of-pocket expenses because, of course, we said in the private sector. So only very few people can really afford the ART. Then, of course, there's the social, cultural, and religious barrier. You know, non-coital parenthood is not accepted by some religious bodies. Then there is this also a big gap in the health education. Many people don't even know how their body functions. Even the people who make use of ART, sometimes it's just that they just want to have a baby. They don't know how IVF works. So when it fails, it's really a big problem. You bringing them to speed on what is the cause of the failure and how to explain it to them. The restrictive health policy barrier also, many governments in Africa do not recognize infertility as a disease and a cause of disability. So resources are usually not allocated for establishing and sponsoring ART services. And many governments in Africa depend on philanthropic non-governmentals, but who don't touch or support infertility care in Africa, because many people believe that the African continent is overpopulated, but which is not. We know that is not totally true. Then another barrier is how to establish ART centers. We need imported materials from which are usually very expensive. Our currencies are always not stable. Everything that you use for IVF, you have to import the disposables, the drugs. Then you need uninterrupted power supply, which in most parts of Africa is a red herring. Then you need quality control and highly trained professionals or personnel, including doctors, embryologists, and of course researchers. So when we look at this work was done in South Africa, trying to see how the costs in an IVF center, how they're distributed. And we can see clearly that the laboratory takes a huge chunk of whatever is charged, especially now with ICSI. And we know that all over the world that the male factor appears to be really disappearing so fast. Actually, there was this study we did in my center, and we saw that over 10 years, the quality of this semen that we're seeing seemed to have depreciated by about 30%. You know, so over 10 years there was a depreciation of about 30%. So that's very significant, and therefore we're doing so many ICSIs now in so many laboratories. I know that's a change that's happening all over the world, but it seems to be very, very pronounced in Africa. Then we look at the cost of setting up a laboratory, the incubators, the micro manipulation system, air handling system, the power supply. Of course, currency exchange rate is not helping us at all. And then, of course, other things like liquid nitrogen are also something that we need to look at. So what are the hurdles that we need to cross? Mainly limited resources. You know, it's so difficult sometimes to talk about these expensive techniques where poverty is an important issue. People are talking about, okay, how can government actually put money into this when tuberculosis, malaria are still killing our people? But of course, we know that the right to reproduce is a human right, and so we cannot neglect this. And most of our healthcare systems are struggling with the problems of malaria, tuberculosis, and STIs, including HIV. And of course, there is this not spoken tactic view that infertile people probably should not be encouraged to have treatment in Africa because we think that Africa is overpopulated. And of course, the one other glaring problem is the technical know-how. So what are the issues that we need to look at? Culturally, the role of the male. The males, it's getting better by the day, but for a very long time, infertility was seen as a female problem. And then, of course, there was also the let out in polygamy that if your wife is not giving you children, you could marry another wife. Of course, we know that that is decreasing, and it is decreasing fast in our environment now. Then the cultural barriers to semen analysis. Men are afraid of that you will diagnose male infertility, and the health system does fail to include men. Of course, again, there is this notion that Africa and Africans tolerate multiple pregnancies better than the Caucasians, and we know that there were works in the early days where it was shown that Nigeria is one of the highest places where multiple pregnancies thrive before the advent of IVF. Then the religious issues like the fate of the leftover embryos, because we know that limited storage facilities are available, mainly not because of the cost of buying storage materials per se, but also training was also an important part of it. Many people don't freeze properly. And so training there is no way you cut and dice it. Training always crops up when we talk about IVF in Africa. So religious concerns about the fate of additional embryos when we cannot freeze properly is also an issue. We know, like I said earlier on, the African women even wish for multiple pregnancy, the complications notwithstanding, especially when they're over 35 years with a long history of infertility, and that's been reported in this environment. Now, the other thing is this: there is no regulation. So most IVF clinics make their own rules and follow different standards, usually depending on where the source is from. That's the parent company or the people who they are trying to emulate come from, whether from the UK or from Belgium or from Denmark. In the same country, you see people having different standards, and that's one of the reasons why the Association for Fertility and Reproductive Health was formed, AFRH for short, to see that some of these vagaries are eliminated. So most ART centers in Nigeria and other developing countries tend to operate on the HFEA guidelines. We know that this practice is not optimal, as there's several things that are different culturally between these different scenarios. And surrogacy is also a slippery slope in this part of the world, especially sometimes when the surrogate refuses cesarean section, and the possibility that financial pressure will lead to exploitation and commodification. Now, let's zero in on some specific things. And one of the things I want to zero in is on technical know-how. We need to solve some of these problems. The need for reproductive health education, ART, is very high in Africa. Training programs in Africa is critically lacking. Properly trained fertility specialists, embryologists, and specialist nurses are hard to come by. So everything needs to train their own. And in Nigeria, doctors, embryologists need to travel to the USA, to UK, Europe, and sometimes even India, and they pay a lot of money for such training. Yet they don't get trained properly because most of the time you can't even touch patients in all these places. They only can observe. So African training programs for various key personnel in ART centers are lacking and only available in very few regions, such as Egypt, South Africa, and very recently in Nigeria. So we need to bridge this gap for there to be advancement for ART in Africa. So I'll conclude by saying that evidently the need for ART far exceeds what is available and accessible. So access is still very low in Africa. So there's an urgent need for us as stakeholders, that's fertility specialists, the clients, professional organizations, religious bodies, and everybody in developing countries to formulate cultural and context-specific guidelines through greater inter-country collaboration with the region to help address some of the ethical dilemmas. And we started doing that. There is now the African Fertility Association. But before that happened, there was a body called ANARA, or African Network and Registry for ART. And they reported 5 years' work in Africa between 2013 and 2017, using 18 countries, and 73 centers were included in this. And what they showed was that the ART provision in Africa was effective, though there was a preponderance of younger women, and then there was a preference for multiple embryo transfer, and the frozen cycles were still not as much, but that's also the picture in Europe. So I think what is happening in Africa, actually, we're just repeating what has happened in other climes. And that's why I think one way that we can jump and step up is to actually collaborate with some of these countries who have gone through these same steps. So registry data is integral to widen access to high quality ART in Africa. This has been, ART monitoring has been successfully established in Africa, though very elementary, and progress must continue. I'll just end with this. This is my last slide, and say that if we're talking about IVF in Africa, there are 4 pillars that we need to look at. We need to look at the education, that's training, and for that, we've started talking to the IVF company to establish a training institute in Nigeria also, which we can, in partnership with the University of Kent, I believe. And then we need to look at cost reduction. That is something that I'm sure the laboratory cost, the cost of drugs will come down the more that we can come together as Africa or as regional bodies and be able to take on some of these manufacturers in order for us to, because now it's so difficult. Most of the time, what we're doing is that we're going through the middlemen to get our products. And this, of course, we know what the effect will be of cost. The regulation also is an important part which we need. You know, it's also been shown in Europe that the more the government gets involved in regulation, the more also they put money to the practice of ART. So it's something we're trying to get the governments in the different countries to be interested in doing this. But we're starting with self-regulation, and the AFRH has started in Nigeria by putting out the minimum standards for setting up an IVF clinic in Lagos. We started in Lagos first, and we hope to take that throughout the country. And finally, data, the importance of data, because without that we cannot plan. Without that, it's difficult for us to collaborate with other countries, which is a very important aspect of work in Africa. The African continent, the regional bodies need to come. West Africa, you know, there is a dichotomy in Africa, which we're also, the African Fertility Society is trying to overcome, the English speaking and the French speaking. But I think this is something that we need to overcome over time, and we have started doing that. So I think the future is very bright for ART in Africa, and I just thank you for listening, and thank you so very much.
Abayomi, thank you very much for that. It's nice to hear a very different perspective. I have to say, we don't have a lot of questions at the moment, folks, so I'm very much going to encourage you to fill out the something in the question box here, because we've literally got one at the moment. What I will try and do is address a few myself, in the hope that a few more will come through, and if they don't, we'll finish a little bit early. That's so, my first question really was, you obviously come from Nigeria.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you, Dr. Abayomi, just to mute your mic? Thank you very much. Sorry, Doctor.
Okay. That's all right. And I guess unmute when you're answering the questions. But so you spoke a little bit of, you're obviously coming from Nigeria. and then you sort of you expand out into Africa a little bit. How do the different countries differ in culture? Are they largely going to follow the Nigerian model, or is it likely that you hinted about the French-speaking ones at the end, that they might want to do something a little bit different?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your thing. Yes, I think there's, just like even in Nigeria, the differences in the different parts of the country. Okay, but it's when we start talking that we can see the differences and how to address them. So the French and the English speaking have been coming together, and I think we're beginning to see some of the differences, but the technology is the same. So I don't see how this will not work over time. But what we're thinking is that the more the data that we have, so we can also plan. For example, now we're trying to see how we'll have conferences in the English-speaking part and in the French-speaking part, so that we can get used to what is important to them. They can get used to what is important to us. But just like Europe too, the English speaking, there's French speaking. So I think these cultural things we will overcome if we can come on the same table.
And you mentioned you were sort of following the HFEA model. How does that work in practice? I mean, do you just take the whole code of practice and try and transcribe that, or do you have to go through it point by point and develop your own?
Yeah, well, right now, what the clinics are doing is that it's like they take point by point and see what is relevant to them and adopt it. Okay. But that's what the AFRH has started now by saying, okay, fine, if you want to have an IVF clinic, what we started with is the minimum requirement for you to start an IVF clinic, okay, before we start going into your practices. Yet we also outlined some important things like, okay, should there be a maximum age, okay, for you to have IVF treatment in Nigeria? We've tried to set that, but we know that that is advisory, because unlike in some other places, there is no legislation backing us up yet. It's like what was done in the UK with the VLEs, where voluntary licensing things. That's what we're still doing now. So your participation is still voluntary. We cannot enforce. So that's why we're starting with, because the government really is still not with us on this.
So the government isn't very keen on that style of regulation, or any sort of regulation, or what do you mean by the government still isn't with us? I don't quite understand that.
Well, you see, I think, I don't know, because I'm not part of the government, but I think one of the things why the government is still not talking so much about, the moment they start putting so much into trying to regulate the practice, probably they also have to start spending some money even to regulate it. So I think it's a matter of putting your money where your mouth is, So maybe that's where the problem is still now. But I think over time they will not have a choice, because we have over 100 IVF clinics in Nigeria right now. So it's growing. So we're going to get to a point that we can no longer be ignored.
Absolutely. And do you imagine similar guidelines right across the continent of Africa, led by Nigeria, or do you think every country will try and do its own thing?
Well, I think every country will have to try to do its own thing. But of course, it might just be to look at, okay, does this apply to us? Does this not apply to us? Because there is no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. So I guess once some people just start and it's working properly, I'm aware also that Uganda has done some things, So I think it's just a matter of, after a while, all the countries will probably have to come on board.
Absolutely. So we've got a question here from Presley Ahmed. Does the government provide subsidies for fertility services in Nigeria?
Not yet. That is the prayer. Not yet. Everything is out of pocket.
So basically, all the patients have to pay in full for each of their treatments right now.
That's right.
And do you know, are there other countries in Africa for which that's is that true right the way across the continent, or?
I guess it's likely to be true throughout the continent. I know South Africa has a sort of pseudo insurance. How it works, I'm not really in the know, but yeah, I think South Africa and Egypt tends to have. I mean, they started assisted conception in a more organized way than West Africa and East Africa. So I guess they have some things that are working.
Okay. Well, we're not getting a lot of questions at the moment. Keith Edwards said it's a excellent presentation. And is there any coordinated philanthropic effort or UN-based initiative around IVF in Nigeria or Africa? Or has Resolve US any influence in Nigeria?
No, what people, tactically what people believe that we are overpopulated. So nobody really wants to support IVF in Nigeria, in Africa, because but I think the picture will change over time. I think one of the things that we're not presenting the data enough to the outside world to see the sheer number of people that are affected by infertility. The picture that people still see is the super fecundity that Africa has been known. But it's still there. Some people have 5 children, but a lot of people can't even have one.
Right. And how do you address that issue when someone comes to you and say, well, it's got to be very low on our priority list because Africa's already overpopulated. So how do you, when someone comes to you with that argument, what's your counter argument?
Well, you see, a recent paper was done by a young lady, and she saw that actually we've always been quoting 1 in 4 as the number of the people that are affected by infertility in Nigeria. But she actually saw that it was 1 in 3. So this tells you the number of the couples that are affected with by infertility in Nigeria. It says it's about 1 in 3, 33% of the couples are affected. So the sheer number of people who we know what infertility does to people is not a medical condition alone. It's a psychological condition, is the sociological condition, actually is an economic condition as well. So, and we see a lot of these people that are affected who cannot function properly in their workplaces. And so it's in our own interest to see how we can help them to overcome this infertility. So I think the more people see this, the more they might want to change their minds about helping to treat women who have, or couples who have infertility in Africa.
Okay, excellent. Question from Hemlata. How many embryos do you typically transfer, and are there any limits?
Well, yes. Now, that's one of the things that the society also looked into. We've said that if we don't want to transfer more than 2 for people, for patients, especially for people below 38. We don't want to transfer more than 2 embryos for them. And the maximum that you can transfer under any condition, even when a 44-year-old is using her eggs, will be 3. But we know that's still a little bit much, but because we're not, PGD is still not everyday occurrence in Africa. One, because of cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So, question from Suleiman here. First of all, he says, what a great webinar. And he's asking for you to sort of look a little bit into the future. So what do you think the immediate next steps will be, and then what do you think will be in the longer term future?
Thank you so much. Well, I think the immediate future of ART in Africa, it's when we have people coming to take us from this level that we are to the next level. Training is number one, because the more the cycles that we do, the more we can look at the manufacturers in the face and say, you know what, you guys, if you want to come to Africa, this is what we want. Mm-hmm. This is, and then that will give us the bargaining power to be able to do that, including in the laboratory, everywhere, because it's so ridiculous now. If you want to buy a lab equipment, the person you're talking to, the manufacturer is in Germany, the person you're talking to is in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So until we get to the critical point where we can say, look, you know what, the person you're talking to should be in Lagos, so that not only if there is a problem with the machine, you get after sales service. So those are the things that will finally bring down the cost of ART in Africa generally, and so and that will help us to solve most of the other problems.
Mm-hmm. Do any of our panel have a question at all? Shadi, you're muted, mate.
I was wondering why there is no question for Rawan. Everybody wants Africa. Dr. Abayomi. I have no questions. I really enjoyed it. So I really want to say thank you for both of you. It's amazing. But no, thank you. I don't have a question. Thank you.
I've got a question here from Brian Hicks. Are single-step embryo culture media gaining popularity over sequential media in Africa? That's the first question. And he also has a follow-up question. What about ICSI use versus conventional insemination?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, every laboratory is making up its decision. For example, we use the sequential. Okay. Over time, I think some clinics have started using the other one. So we don't, because we really have to compile our data for decision making, and see what works, what does not work in our own region as well. So, but ICSI, it's at least 90% in Africa, because the male factor is really very bad here. Maybe because of the low health education. Infection plays a major role in this part of the world. And so sometimes you take the sperm and you put it together, it's like it's destroying itself, So a lot of patients, we do a lot of ICSI. ICSI must be about 90% of our treatment in Africa. In some clinics, 100%.
Right. Wow. So nearly everyone's using ICSI. Well, that's amazing. And what about the sequential over single-use media?
Yeah, I guess now the sequential was in vogue for everybody almost at the time, but I think some people are using the single use now. But I don't have data about other laboratories. I can only talk about mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you would have thought there would be a sort of a real need to move over to single-use media because it's so much easier.
Yes, but that's the problem again of not coming together, because it depends on who I'm listening to. Yeah.
I mean, I think you've highlighted a few very key issues there. The first was training, and I think one of the philosophies we have at the IVF company, for instance, is to give a very large number of people a very small basic training, and then have like a pyramid where you end up almost like a selection process where a smaller number of people do the next step up, and then you then narrow it down to the ones that will become the the best at it, as it were. All those that don't quite make that stage, nonetheless, are very educated, and they may end up working in IVF administration or things like that. It's and a good training program, I think, is absolutely essential. And then the second thing that you highlighted is about the regulation and the need to do that properly, because from that perspective, you can see a scenario where everybody wants to do their own thing, and we'd certainly be very happy to help you in all of those particular areas. So listen, we are out of questions, so we are going to finish a little bit earlier, but I know that Shadi wants to say a few words to close us down. So Shadi, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Abayomi. Thank you, Rawan. I'm so excited also that we are going to work with Dr. Abayomi in training IVF and genetics and biopsy and ICSI through the University of Kent, and the faculty will be with us, and Mayas as well. So we're so excited to come to Nigeria. This will be another adventure for us, for the IVF company and Kent University. So I have two announcements to make. First, this will be the last, not the last, the one before the last webinar, which is next Tuesday, is coming from Nigeria and from Saudi Arabia, because we're going to end this season. We're going to give you 4 weeks break from us, but we're going to come back in a whole different new season that is going to include the patient as well, the IVF patient, and the clinics, and the scientists, and the student, our student as well. So this is one of the announcements. And the last thing I want to say, we're going to open May intake, but this time we have our own new training center in Dubai. It is 5A, 6A Jumeirah Center on the Jumeirah Road, like 1 minute away from La Mer Beach. We wanted to make the IVF training and a holiday in Dubai, so you can mix it together, and it will be a very nice place for you guys to come to the training, go for shopping, go to the beach. So we are almost 4 weeks away from opening ceremony. So please, if you want to join us in May intake, please contact us as support at the IVF company. And if you want to, and also if you want to do training in Africa, please contact Dr. Abayomi in Nordic Fertility Group, because soon we will launch the IVF and the biopsy genetic training there. I will give it back to Professor Darren to close, and I don't know if Rawan, she want to ask something, because I think she want to ask something, or Mayas, or Dr. Abayomi. All to you, Professor. Okay. I'm sure you are excited to go to Nigeria in Lagos, no, Professor?
Absolutely, absolutely, I'd love to. So I don't know, Mayas, did you have anything to add?
Well, I just want to thank the both speakers. Fantastic presentations. Really, every week we are very fascinated by the knowledge that we get through the presentations of our guests. And I hope to see everyone very soon in the training center in Dubai or in Nigeria, wherever we start first. Yeah. And thank you so much. No questions.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much. We've had over 120 attendees today, so we're consistently over 100. We are absolutely delighted for you to join us every time. Thank you very much to our speakers, to Rawan Haroun.
Thank you.
And to Abayomi Ajayi.
Yes. And
yes, and thank you very much to IVF Tech for supporting this meeting. We are delighted to have you on board as partners. We're really, really looking forward to working with you again. Absolutely fantastic. We're looking forward to going into Nigeria, and we are especially looking forward to our new fantastic new training center where we hope to be welcoming you all, not only to learn about some wonderful IVF technology, but also to come and have a sip of tea, coffee, maybe something a little bit else out on the beach, Le Mer Beach, and it will be absolutely fantastic. So thank you one and all, and we hope to see you soon. That's the end of the webinar for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.